crume, a state-of-the-art aircraft, and a calm night. But when the instruments began to betray them, could skill and experience change the course of this tragic tale? Let's dive into the harrowing events of that fateful night, chapter by chapter.
Of AeroPerú Flight 603, a night etched in history as a symbol of suspense and tragedy. It is shortly past midnight on October 2, 1996. AeroPerú Flight 603 is ready to depart from Jorge Chávez International Airport in Lima, Peru, with a thunderous roar of its engines. The destination is Santiago, Chile, a picturesque city 3 hours away. The aircraft, a Boeing 757, hailed as a masterpiece of modern technology and an epitome of safe air travel, is prepared for a critical test tonight. The flight is under the seasoned command of Captain Eric Schreiber, aged 58, and First Officer David Fernandez, aged 42. Both have devoted their lives to the skies, amassing an extraordinary 30,000 hours of flight experience. On board are 61 passengers and 9 crew members. The passengers include mostly Chileans, along with individuals of various nationalities: 11 Peruvians, 6 Mexicans, 4 British, and 1 New Zealander. The night is calm, gentle breezes, clear skies, and excellent visibility on the ground. However, as the aircraft ascends to 1,000 feet, a layer of clouds begins to envelop the surroundings. This is the moment when silence takes hold of the air, marking the start of a suspenseful tale. As the aircraft gradually lifted off the ground and entered the air, First Officer Fernandez noticed something unusual. The altimeters, instruments designed to display altitude based on air pressure, were reading 0. Strangely, despite the aircraft clearly being in flight, the instruments indicated it was still on the ground. The aircraft was equipped with 3 altimeters, 1 for the captain, 1 for the first officer, and 1 as a backup. Unfortunately, at this critical moment, all 3 altimeters had failed. The night remained calm, with gentle winds, clear skies, and excellent ground visibility. But as the aircraft climbed to 1,000 feet, a thick layer of clouds began to envelop it. This was the moment when the air turned silent, marking the beginning of an eerie tale of suspense. The plane had entered a dense layer of clouds, leaving the pilots entirely dependent on their instruments. However, they soon realized that the very instruments they relied on for their lives and the safety of their passengers had become unreliable. Captain Schreiber noticed that his airspeed readings did not match those of First Officer Fernandez. Meanwhile, Fernandez observed discrepancies in his own airspeed indicators. Then, suddenly, a warning echoed through the cockpit. Rudder ratio warning. The aircraft's computer believed the plane was flying at high speed and advised the pilots to limit rudder movements. It was akin to a car's system warning the driver not to make sharp steering adjustments at high speed. In reality, the aircraft was not flying at high speed. This confusion was caused by faulty sensors. One warning after another began to flood the cockpit, creating an atmosphere of fear and disorientation. The Mach trim warning soon followed, indicating that the horizontal stabilizer setting was unsuitable for high-speed flight. But this too turned out to be false, as the aircraft was not at high speed. Now the pilots were flying through the dark clouds of the night, betrayed by their instruments. For a moment, it felt as though both the aircraft and its pilots were blind. In this pitch-black night, they had only their skills and instincts to rely on. But the truth was, they were on the brink of facing a chapter of suspense that would change their lives forever.
Meditative and composed, projecting confidence and professionalism. Captain Schreiber, relying on his extensive experience, made an immediate decision. The aircraft needed to be diverted toward the ocean to avoid the dangers of the mountainous terrain. It was a prudent and necessary choice, as the high peaks surrounding Lima were shrouded in the darkness of night, and the malfunctioning instruments heightened the risk significantly. "Fernandez, declare an emergency immediately." Schreiber's commanding voice carried a mix of determination and unease. His words heightened the tension in the cockpit, making the gravity of the situation unmistakable. Fernandez contacted air traffic control to declare an emergency. This marked the first moment when Schreiber took full control of the aircraft. His hands gripped the controls firmly, but beads of sweat on his forehead betrayed the immense pressure of the unfolding crisis. Fernandez referred to the checklist to diagnose the problem, but every passing second felt like time slipping through their fingers. Both pilots were acutely aware that the unexpected could strike at any moment. Air traffic control advised the pilots to focus on diagnosing the issue rather than rushing to land. However, neither the controllers nor the pilots realized that the altitude data appearing on the controller's radar was derived from the aircraft's faulty sensors. "Fernandez, it seems the altitude readings are unreliable, but the airspeed information is correct." Schreiber allowed himself a brief sigh of relief, unaware that this belief was based on yet another misconception. At that moment, the only tools at their disposal were their skills and years of experience. Controllers provided the pilots with updates on their ground speed. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though they had two reliable pieces of information, speed and altitude. Yet the reality was far from it. His eyes fixed on the checklist while Schreiber focused on the controls. Every alarm sounding in the cockpit amplified the tension. Neither pilot could understand what the real problem was. In the darkness of the night over the Pacific Ocean, despite their best efforts, the two pilots found themselves trapped in a vicious cycle with no apparent way out. They had no idea that their altitude readings were incorrect, and they were heading towards a danger far more lethal than they could comprehend. Over the calm ocean below, another terrifying warning echoed through the cockpit. "Overspeed!" It was a critical alert. Captain Schreiber activated the speed brakes, trying to slow down the aircraft. Every action was a calculated decision, as excessive speed could put dangerous pressure on the aircraft's structure or cause it to break apart entirely. "Slow it down or we're finished!" Schreiber's voice carried a clear note of urgency and pressure. As the crew attempted to control the speed, another alarm suddenly blared. "Stall!" This new warning left the pilot shaken. The cockpit was now filled with conflicting warnings. The aircraft was simultaneously indicating that it was flying too fast and too slow. "How is this even possible?" First Officer Fernandez said in confusion. An aerodynamic stall occurs when the angle of attack exceeds the critical limit, causing the wings to lose lift. The stall alarm was triggered by external angle of attack sensors, which were independent of the pitot-static system. While this sensor was functioning correctly, the conflicting data from other systems only added to the confusion. Glistened on Captain Schreiber's forehead, a stark reflection of the mental turmoil he was experiencing. Each alarm signaled a different threat, both equally fatal. "Fernandez, what do we do? These alarms are going to kill us!" Schreiber's voice was thick with anxiety. Fernandez suggested the possibility of using another aircraft for guidance, but this was merely a temporary fix. Both pilots firmly believed they were flying at an altitude of 9,500 feet, unaware of the far greater danger lurking just below. In reality, the aircraft was descending perilously close to the ocean, playing a deadly game with the incessant alarms. Stick shakers rattled the control columns, as if urgently warning the pilots that time was running out. The overspeed warning, stall alarms, and a cascade of other dangerous signals created a suffocating atmosphere in the cockpit. The pilot's decision-making abilities were paralyzed by the chaos. Schreiber was convinced the overspeed warning was accurate, while Fernandez insisted the stall alarm was the real threat. A misjudgment, a fatal outcome. Both the controllers and the onboard altimeters consistently confirmed that the aircraft was stable at 9,500 feet. In reality, the plane was dangerously close to the ocean's surface. We're safe, aren't we?" Captain Schreiber's voice was laced with desperation, but the reality was far from safe. In the pitch-black night, the aircraft moved inexorably toward its fate. The cacophony of alarms, the pilot's growing confusion, and the controller's misleading information all coalesced into the making of an unimaginable tragedy. A terrifying warning. Too low, terrain. Too low, terrain. This final warning shattered any illusion of control. The aircraft was moments from catastrophe, and the realization came too late to avert disaster.
Creative and composed, projecting confidence and professionalism. A chilling warning of proximity. The warning was a proximity alert issued by the aircraft's radio altimeter. This device, mounted beneath the aircraft, sends radio waves to the ground and measures the time it takes for them to return. It was one of the most reliable systems, especially in scenarios where other instruments failed. However, under the stress of conflicting alarms, the pilots failed to take it seriously. Captain Schreiber's trial. The pressure in the cockpit had reached its peak. Captain Schreiber tried to dismiss the warning, assuming it was another false alert caused by the malfunctioning instruments. "These are all false alarms. We need to maintain altitude," Schreiber insisted to his first officer, though his voice betrayed his diminishing confidence. First Officer Fernandez glanced uncertainly at the radio altimeter, which indicated that the plane was descending rapidly. Yet, overwhelmed by conflicting alarms and reliant on the faulty data from other instruments in air traffic control, he hesitated to act. A chain of poor decisions. The pilots firmly believed they were cruising at 10,000 feet and nearing the Andes Mountains. They assumed the real danger was not the ground below, but a potential overspeed or stall scenario. Air traffic control reported a ground speed of 200 knots, dangerously close to stall speed, further fueling the confusion. Meanwhile, another chilling alert sounded in the cockpit. "Wait, sink." It signaled that the aircraft was descending rapidly. Communication breakdown in the cockpit. The tension in the cockpit had grown so intense that clear communication between Captain Schreiber and First Officer Fernandez was no longer possible. Schreiber focused on maintaining control of the aircraft, while Fernandez became consumed by deciphering the alarms and checklist. "These readings are lying, Schreiber, but which one is telling the truth?" Fernandez's frustration was evident in his words. The aircraft approaches disaster. The pilots had three potentially reliable pieces of information. Ground speed data provided by air traffic control. Readings from the radio altimeter offering accurate altitude information. And warnings from the stick shaker indicating the aircraft was flying dangerously slow to maintain lift. Despite these, they continued to focus on malfunctioning instruments and contradictory alarms. The aircraft was in reality only a few hundred feet above the ocean, yet the pilots believed they were at 9,700 feet. The increasing confusion and pressure in the cockpit prevented them from making the right decisions. In the stillness of the night, the aircraft approached its fate. The proximity warning echoed one final time. "Too low, terrain. Too low, terrain." This was their last chance to avoid disaster, but the overwhelmed pilots failed to seize it. The tragic end of Flight 603. In the darkness of the Pacific night, the final moments of Flight 603 were harrowing. At 1:11 a.m., the aircraft met its tragic end, crashing into the Pacific Ocean at a speed of 460 kilometers per hour, with its left wingtip striking first at a 70-degree angle. An unspeakable tragedy. After the crash, rescue teams recovered 9 bodies floating on the ocean's surface,
but the remaining victims were lost to the depths, along with the wreckage. Astoundingly, even at the moment of impact, the captain's instruments indicated an altitude of 9,700 feet, leaving no clue that the aircraft was falling. Investigations. Unraveling the truth. The accident investigation was conducted by the Peruvian Accident Investigation Board with assistance from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board. Both black boxes were recovered from the crash site by the Peruvian Navy. Key findings. The investigation revealed a critical piece of evidence. All static ports on the aircraft's fuselage were covered with tape, which became the root cause of the disaster. These ports were essential for accurate airspeed and altitude readings. Their obstruction led to the cascade of erroneous data that overwhelmed the pilots. Cause of the accident. The tragedy was ultimately the result of several human errors. Failure to remove the tape. During maintenance, the static ports were covered with tape to protect them during polishing. However, the mechanic forgot to remove the tape afterward. Supervisory oversight. The mechanic's supervisor failed to catch the oversight. Pre-flight inspection lapses. The captain overlooked the tape during the pre-flight inspection. Its color matched the fuselage, making it harder to detect. Report conclusions. The final report attributed the accident to several factors. 1. Maintenance negligence. The failure to remove the tape from the static ports was the primary cause. 2. Captain's errors. The captain ignored the GPWAS alerts and dismissed the radio altimeter's accurate readings. 3. First officer's shortcomings. The first officer failed to assertively warn the captain and push for immediate corrective actions. Impact of the tragedy. Closure of AeroPerú. The airline declared bankruptcy in March 1999. Boeing's responsibility. Boeing accepted partial liability and paid over $1 million per victim to the families of those lost.